before the storm. It was the early 2000s, a time when life felt simpler, though not without its challenges. The world was just beginning to change with the rise of technology. Cell phones are becoming more common. The internet was growing, and people were learning to live in this strange, fast-paced digital era. For me, however, life was still rooted in something far more traditional. Family. I had been married for several years, and together, my wife and I were raising 2 children. They were 4 and 6 at the time, small enough to cling to their mother's side, but old enough to chatter endlessly about their days. To me, they were the heart of my world. Everything I worked for, everything I dreamed about, was for them. From the outside, we must have looked like a picture-perfect family. We had a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, 2 cars parked in the driveway, and a yard where the kids played on summer afternoons. Neighbors waved when they saw us. Teachers praised our children's good manners, and relatives often commented on him, managed the household, and took care of endless responsibilities that often go unnoticed. It was natural, I told myself, for her to seem tired, maybe even a little withdrawn. Yet the signs kept appearing, small and subtle at first, then louder and harder to ignore. She began spending more time away from home. According to her, she was taking the children to her parents' house several times a week. It didn't sound entirely unusual on the surface. Her parents loved the kids, and she had always been close to her family. But the distance gnawed at me. They lived nearly 90 minutes away, 3 hours round trip. To make that journey 2 or 3 times a week was not just unusual, it was exhausting. Why would she choose to spend so much of her time on the road, dragging 2 small children back and forth like that? At night, when she was asleep, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to ask. Had she grown tired of me? Was she looking for something more? Or was I simply imagining problems that weren't there? The worst part was the uncertainty. I loved her, and because of that love, I wanted desperately to give her the benefit of the doubt. But love has a cruel way of blinding you, of making you ignore the evidence that's right in front of you. The children, in their innocence, spoke freely. They would come home and talk about the things they had done, the places they had seen, the meals they had eaten. Sometimes their stories didn't quite add up. They spoke of short visits, not long days spent with their grandparents. They mentioned lunches and car rides, naps in places I couldn't identify. Their words were fragmented, but enough to spark doubt in my heart. Still, I brushed it aside, convincing myself that young kids often confuse details. Perhaps I was overthinking, but the doubts refused to stay quiet. They grew louder each week, pressing against me until I could no longer ignore them. I began to watch her more closely, paying attention to the small details I had overlooked before. The time she left the house, the time she returned, the way her stories sometimes contradicted themselves. And then, one day, I decided I needed proof. Not for anyone else, but for myself. I began to track the mileage on her car. Every time she came home, I would check the odometer, noting the numbers, calculating the distance she had supposedly traveled. The results hit me like a punch to the gut. She was driving far more than necessary, hundreds of extra miles each week. Not once, not twice, but consistently. At that point, I knew something was terribly wrong. No one drives an extra 400 miles a week without reason. And yet, even as the evidence piled up, I still clung to hope. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I would ask her one day and she would laugh, point out something I had overlooked, and all the suspicion would melt away. That was the story I wanted to believe, the fairy tale ending I prayed for. But in the quiet corners of my heart, I already knew the truth. I could feel in the pit of my stomach that cold, sinking dread that comes when your world begins to collapse, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Life went on. I woke up each morning, went to work, helped the kids with their homework, smiled at neighbors, and played the role of a loving husband. All the while, a storm was gathering just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment it would finally break. And that moment was coming sooner than I could have imagined. Suspicion. Suspicion is a cruel companion. It creeps into your mind slowly at first, whispering in quiet moments, then grows louder until it drowns out everything else. For me, It started with little things, strange explanations, long absences, small inconsistencies in her words. But as weeks turned into months, those whispers became a steady drumbeat I couldn't silence. I found myself studying her face when she spoke, searching for the truth in her eyes. She had never been a convincing liar, not to me. I had known her too long, loved her too deeply, to miss the tiny tells. The way her voice slightly when she insisted on something. I would catch her gaze slipping away from mine, as if she was afraid I might see the truth hiding there. The mileage checks became my secret ritual. Each time she pretends of putting something away or checking on the car, my eyes would flick to the odometer and my stomach would tighten. The numbers never lied. Week after week, the miles stacked up far beyond what was reasonable for trips to her parents' house. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if my suspicions were nothing more than paranoia, poisoning my marriage for no reason? The children's laughter still filled the house. Our family still looked whole from the outside. Did I really want to be the one to tear it all apart? And so I stayed quiet. But silence is not the same as peace. Inside, I was unraveling. I began to notice other things. The way she dressed a little differently when she said she was visiting her parents, the extra care she put into her makeup. Her excuses grew thinner, stretched too far, like a fabric ready to tear. I lost track of time. Traffic was bad. Mom wanted me to stay a little longer. They were plausible, yes, but not convincing. Not anymore. Nights became the hardest. We would lie in bed side by side, the children asleep in their rooms. The house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, fallen in love with years ago. The laughter in her eyes, the promises we made, the future we had dreamed together. I thought of our wedding day, the vows we exchanged, the way she had looked at me when we held our newborn for the first time. Had all of that been real, or had she already been drifting away, piece by piece, while I clung to a fading illusion? The children, in their innocence, sometimes fueled my doubts without realizing it. One afternoon, my youngest came running into the house, full of excitement, telling me about the fun lunch they had on their trip, but the story didn't make sense. He mentioned places that weren't near his grandparents' house, and a nap that didn't fit the timeline she had given me. I smiled and nodded, not letting my unease show, but inside, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. Every laugh we shared, every meal we ate together, carried an invisible shadow. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe in us, but my instincts told me otherwise. Instincts I had ignored for too long. It was around this time that I realized something important. I could not live with suspicion forever. Sooner or later, I needed the truth. Whether it shattered me or set me free, I had to know, because living in doubt is its own kind of slow death. And so, though I didn't yet know how, I made a silent promise to myself. I would uncover the truth. Whatever it cost, whatever it meant for the life I had built, I would not let the shadows consume me. The seeds of suspicion had been planted. Now they were taking root, and soon they would grow into something I could no longer ignore. The discovery, truth in the inbox. The day it all came crashing down began like any other. It was an ordinary afternoon, quiet, unremarkable. The kind of day you never expect to change your life forever. The kids were playing in the living room, their laughter echoing through the house, while I sat down at the computer to check a few things. Back then, in the early 2000s, we all still shared the family computer. Bulky, slow, humming softly in the corner of the room. AOL was a gateway to the online world, and email was still a novelty that carried a strange sense of excitement. That's when I saw it. A small yellow sticky note, carelessly left next to the keyboard. On it, in my wife's familiar handwriting, was her AOL password, staring at a key that could unlock all the secrets she had tried so hard to hide. I remember staring at that note, my hands trembling slightly. My heart thudded in my chest, torn between two impulses. One part of me told me to walk away, to leave it alone, to protect myself from whatever truth lay behind those doors. The other part, the part that had lived with suspicion for months, urged me forward. I had been living in the shadows of doubt for too long. I needed light, no matter how blinding it might be. Ordinary, carrying subject lines that gave me pause. Messages exchanged between my wife and her old college best friend. At first, they looked harmless, just casual conversation. But as I clicked and read, the words began to slice through me like knives. There was, spelled out in plain, undeniable sentences. My wife was seeing someone, an old boyfriend from high school. She wrote about him in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. She spoke of the time they spent together, the way she felt. The woman I had built a life with, the mother of my children, was betraying me. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen. Minutes, hours, it all blurred together. My hands shook as I printed the emails, each page sliding out of the printer like a hammer falling against my chest. I gathered them, stacked them neatly, and hid them away. Proof, evidence, a record of the life I thought I had, unraveling in black and white. That night, I looked at her differently. She spoke to me, laughed, kissed the children goodnight, carried on as if everything was normal. But I knew the words she had written, the lies she had lived, and yet I said nothing. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to understand the full picture. Who was he, really? How often did they meet? Where did they go? I couldn't just have whispers and emails. I needed the undeniable truth that no one could talk their way out of. And so the plan began to form. The sticky note had given me the key to her secrets, but it was only the beginning. What came next would expose everything, not just for me, but for everyone involved. That night, as I lay beside her in bed, I stared into the darkness, my mind racing. My heart was broken, yes, but it was also hardening. The man I had been, the trusting husband, the quiet dreamer, was fading away. In his place was someone new, someone who would no longer sit in silence, someone ready to face the storm head-on. The truth had been found. Now it was time to act.